Hello friends, welcome to my channel Tech Talks. Today we are going to discuss Angular interview questions that will be helpful you to crack the interviews. So please subscribe to my channel and like the videos. So let's get started with the questions. First question is, what is Angular framework? Angular is open source front-end platform which is basically used to develop web application, mobile application and desktop application. Also, Angular application also known as a single page application. Second question is, what is key components of Angular? First one is component. Components are the main way where we can specify the logic and HTML of your page. Components are used to create the UI widgets and we have only one component per DOM. Next one is module. It is logical boundary of your application. It is used to group component, directive, services, and pipe that are used in your application. And we can define the module using the @ng-module declaration. Next one is template. Template represent view of your Angular application. Means it is a template a template contains HTML code of your page. Next is services. Services is used to create the component that share the data across the entire application and also between the components. Services also used to make a connection with data web API and fetch the data and show it into your Angular application. Next one is metadata. Metadata used to add more data to your Angular class. Next question is difference between JIT and AOT. AOT is added onwards the Angular 6 version and it is main feature of your Angular. So let's say the difference. JIT stands for just in time and AOT stands for ahead of time. In JIT, application compiles at runtime in the browser, whereas in AOT, application compiles at the time of build. JIT loads the application slowly, whereas AOT loads the application more quickly as compared to JIT. In JIT, all files are separately compiled, whereas AOT compiles all code together. Next question is, what is the main purpose of main.ts, package.json, angular-cli.json? Main.ts file is the main entry point of your application. It is the file which is used for bootstrapping your application. Means you can specify the component name in bootstrap module. In bracket, you can specify the component name. Suppose you want to start your application with different component, then you can do the changes in main.ts file. Next one is package.json. Package.json is the npm configuration file. It contains dependency of your application. Like you are installing the third-party libraries in your Angular application. So package.json contains the versions of your libraries, and you can install this library using the npm. Next one is Angular CLI. Angular-cli.json. It is important configuration file for your application. You can specify the environments in this file. We have multiple environments: development, QA, stage, and production. Suppose you want to use different CSS file for development environment and different file for QA environment. So you can do the changes in angular-cli.json file. Next one is, what is module and main properties of ng module? Modules are logical boundaries of your application. It is used to group modules, components, directives, pipes, and services that are used by your application. And few of important properties of ng modules are, first one is imports. Imports contains the list of all modules. It is an array. It contains all the modules which used by your application. Next one is declaration. Declaration section contains all the component, directives, and pipes. The next one is providers. Provider contains all the services which are used by your application. Next one is bootstrap. It contains component name which gets rendered at the start of your application. Next one is export. It contains component, directives, pipes, and modules which can access by outside the module. Like we have two modules, and first module, second module. Second module wants to use the components and directive which was present in first module. So you can add that into export section. And here is the some code for the ng modules. Means we have declaration, imports, provider, bootstrap, and export. Let's move to next question. What are components? Components are the main way where we can specify logic and HTML. It is used to create UI widgets. You can declare the components using the @component directives. And selector and template is the important properties and mandatory property of your component. Also, you need to provide component name using export class component name, and you can specify your logic. Next question is, components are directive or not? Yes, components is directive in which we have template. Next question, what are directives and how to create custom directives? Directives is used to add behavior to an existing DOM element or existing component instance. To create custom directive, first you need to create the file customdirectives.ts in which you have to define @directives in which selector is a mandatory property you have to provide, and then you write export class and your directive name like highlight directives, and in constructor you will get element ref, so you can change the background color or style of your element. Once you create the custom directives, you need to register that directive into app.module.ts. So you need to open app.module.ts file. In ng module declaration section, you have to define your custom directive name. And to use that custom directive, you can refer the below code. Like here I am using, I am assigning custom directives to paragraph. So when I assign my highlight to paragraph, then its background color gets changed with the yellow color. So this way we can create the custom directives. Next question is, what is difference between component and directives? Components are used to create UI widgets, whereas directives is used to add behavior to an existing DOM element. We use @component to declare the components, and for directives we use @directive. Component is used to break the application into smaller components, whereas directives is used to define reusable components. And we have only one component per DOM element, but we have multiple directives per DOM element. And for component, template URL and template are mandatory properties, whereas directive don't use views. What is interpolation? It is used for one-way data binding, and it will print the data. Interpolation is syntax that Angular converts it into property binding. Example, suppose we have app.component.ts file in which we have title and URL property, and you want to display that property into your HTML page. So you will use the interpolation to print the values from view to HTML. Now next question is, what is data binding in Angular? It is used for communication between the application UI and business logic. Means suppose you want to bind the data from view component to HTML, then in that, or vice versa from HTML to component, then in this way data binding will happen. Next question is, what are the data binding types? There are 3 data binding types: source to view, view to source, and third one is two-way data binding. So source to view we can perform using the interpolation, property binding, attribute binding, class binding, and style binding. And here are the syntax of your how to bind with data from source to view. View to source, you use the click section event we use, means like click on particular element, we should capture that into components, and so that is our from view to source. And next one is two-way data binding. For two-way data binding, we have to define some variable in component and you are using it into HTML. So then whatever value change in component, that gets reflected into HTML, and whatever value change in HTML, that gets reflected into your component. That is two-way data binding. Next question is name some common events that you can use for event binding. There are some of events I have listed here, like focus, blur, scroll, cut, copy, paste, key down, key press, key up, mouse enter, mouse down, mouse up, click, double click. This is the few of events I have listed. Next question is what is two-way data binding? Two-way data binding means change in UI automatically change in the component field and vice versa. To achieve two-way data binding, we need ng model directive. ng model comes as a part of a forms module to implement the two-way data binding. Here is the example I have provided how we can achieve the two-way data binding. You have to write the ng model equal to, you have to provide your property name. Now, next question is what is bootstrapping in Angular? Is it possible to start Angular in other way rather than app module? If yes, then how? Bootstrapping means starting an Angular application. Yes, it is possible. We can start Angular using our defined component instead of app module. For this, we can use the following step. Make a module, name it as a test.module.ts file in app folder. Then create a component using the command ng generate component test. It will generate the component for you. Go to test module and register your test component into declaration section. Then go to main.ts file and put your module name test module into bootstrap module method. Then you have to go to index.html and in there you have to add your component selector in body tag. So in this way you can achieve. Next question is how does Angular application get started? Like as we discussed, main.ts is a main entry point of your application. Here we have defined some bootstrap module and you have to provide the module name. So it will pick up that module. Then it goes to app.module.ts file. In app.module.ts file in bootstrap section, you have defined the component name that will pick up that component. Then goes to that component, app.component.ts, in which we have defined selector, template URL and style URL. So it will go next to index.html. Here we have to define the selector of your component so that it will get rendered. And then last one is app component.html. You have to define some HTML for your HTML page. So like this way, Angular application gets started. Then next one is what is canActive, canLoad and canDeactive. canActive means it is used to prevent unauthorized user from accessing the certain route. Like we are authorizing users, we are using some login, and after that you will get token and all that thing. So we are validating whether it is a valid user or not. So for that, to implement that, you have to create one service, authguard service.ts, in which you need to implement the canActive interface. And canActive interface have canActive method. So you have to provide some implementation in this method to validate your user whether it is authorized or not. Then you have to do some changes in app.route.ts file. You have to decorate your path with the canActive and you have to provide your service name, whatever you have created, authguard service, that will validate your user. Then next one is canLoad. It is used to prevent the application from loading the entire module lazily if the user is not authorized. So for this, to this also you need to create one service, authguard service.ts, in which you have to implement the canLoad interface, and you have to provide implementation for canLoad method, in which you are adding code to validate whether it is valid user or not. If it is valid, then we are loading the route. If it is not valid user, then we are not loading the route. And also you need to do some changes in app.route.ts file. So you have to decorate that with canLoad attribute and you have to provide the authguard service, whatever your service name. Here I have name as authguard service. Next one is canDeactivate. canDeactivate is used to prevent the user from accidentally leaving a route or page in your application. It decides if route can be deactivated. If all guard returns to true, then navigation will continue. To achieve this, also we have to create the OutGuard service.ts file in which you have to implement the canActive interface, and there is also canDeactivate method is available. You have to provide implementation in this method, and in app.module.ts file you have to add it into your path canDeactivate, and in bracket you have to provide your service name. So next question is, what is the mandatory property of your component? So selector and template or template URL are the mandatory properties of your component. Selector is used to render your template, and template URL is the URL of your HTML page. If you miss the selector properties, you will get the below error at runtime. You will get like errors. The selector ng component did not match any elements. If you miss template or template URL property, then it generates compile time error as below. Like when if you miss that error, if you miss that template or template URL, and at the time of build, when you are executing it using the CLI, you will get that error, that component missing a template. So both are the mandatory property you have to provide. Next question is difference between provides present in component and present in app.module.ts. Means providers which are present in app.module.ts, which acts as a globally, and whatever providers present in particular component which acts as a private, means only that component can access that. Next question is, how can we use service for only one component? We can add service in provider in module.ts, then its service acts as a globally available. If you want to use service only one for your component, then you have to add the service in provider section of a particular component. Let's take an example. I have added the providers in particular component. So in component section, we have selector, template URL, style URLs, and provider section also available. So if you want to use service for that particular component, then you have to define that service into provider section. Next question is, how we can share data between components? We use input and output to pass the data between components. Input is used to pass the data from component to child component. Let's take an example. Suppose you want to pass the data from parent component to child component, then you have to specify it into child selector, like user details equal to user details. Means this user details is present in your parent component.html. It contains data and we are passing it to child component. And to get that data, you have to define @input property and the same name as we define in our parent HTML. Same name should be in the child component. You have to define some type, so you will get that data from parent to child. And output is used to pass data from child component to parent component. Like suppose let's take example. If you want to pass some data from child component to parent component, and then for that you have to define @output property with equal to new event emitter, and on particular event or particular section you have to emit that event. Like here I have emitted that this dot edit click dot emit, and I am passing this record to parent component. And what we do in the parent component, in parent component.html, we have defined the selector for child component in which you have to get that event, like edit click equal to on edit click event, and this on edit click event method should be defined in your parent component.ts file, so that in which you will get the data from child component. Next question is, how to pass data between components if there is no parent-child relationship? Then we can use the BehaviorSubject from RxJS library to pass the data. Let's take example. You have to create one service. Here I have created employee.service.ts, in which I have defined user details, colon BehaviorSubject bracket. I have defined type user type equal to new behavior subject. And also here I am writing two methods, set user details and get user details. In set user details, I am assigning the value like this dot user details dot next, and I'm assigning the value. And in get user details, I'm getting the data as observable. So then how we get that data into component? So we have to subscribe that employee service in our ng on init event to get the data. Like they are here in ng on init, I am using this dot employee service dot get user details, and I am subscribing to the observable. So in response, I'm getting the user details. And for setting the data from component, I have to create one method and defining some property to user details. And I'm calling the employee service method set user details and I'm passing the data to that method so that it will pass to the particular field. Like next question, in which lifecycle hook we subscribe the behavior subject? We can subscribe the behavior subject in ng on it. As we discussed in previous example, here we are subscribing to the observable to get the data. Next question is, what is lazy loading in Angular? Lazy loading is the process of loading the component, modules, or other asset of website when they are required. Lazy loading helps to keep the bundle size small, which helps to reduce the load time. To achieve the lazy loading, we have load children available in Angular. So for when we define the routes and when we define path, you have to define your load children path, like load children colon, and here in import section, you have to define your module path and dot then, and here you have to define your module name. Now next question, how we can modify HTTP request or response? We can modify HTTP request or HTTP response in interceptor file. Interceptor.ts file is used to add token globally. Means every time you don't need to add your token. Whenever you call web API, then every time you don't need to add token to your request. You just globally add it into interceptor.ts file. Now we can see how we create interceptor. To create interceptor, you have to create one file like token interceptor.ts file, in which we are defining class token interceptor, which implements the HTTP interceptor, which has the intercept method, in which we are getting the token and we are setting it into header to every request, and we are returning the request. So once you create this interceptor, then you have to add this interceptor in providers. So you have to go to app.module.ts file, and in provider section you have to provide this provider in you have to provide it into provider section, like provide HTTP interceptor use class. For use class property, you have to define your custom interceptor class name like token interceptor, and you have to set multi equal to true. Let's move to next question. What is Angular CLI and list of CLI commands? Angular CLI is a command line interface to scaffold and build the Angular app. And to install the latest version of Angular CLI, you can use npm install @angular/CLI@latest. For creating new commands, we use ng-generate component name. To creating service, we use ng-generate service name. For creating the module, we can use ng-generate module. You have to provide your module name. For directives, we use ng-generate directives directive name. And for creating pipe, we use ng-generate pipe name. For creating routing guard, we use ng-generate guard name. For creating class, we can use ng-generate CL class name. For interface, ng-generate interface name. And last one is for creating enum, we use ng-generate enum, and you have to provide enum name. Next question is, what is dependency injection in Angular? Dependency injection is used to inject the dependent object into component. Angular comes with its own dependency injection framework for resolving the dependencies. Let's take example. I have created one employee service and I have some methods in this get user details. And I want to use that get user details method in app.component.ts. So for that, I'm injecting here in constructor, I'm injecting the employee service. I have provided private employee service colon, and here you have to define your service name. And using this employee service object, we can access the service method, get user details, and we are getting the data. Like this way, we are injecting the dependency service. Now, next question is explain about @injectable. Injectable is decorator which tells that class can be used within the dependency injection. Like when we create a service, there is a first parameter @injectable, which defines that service can be used as a dependency injection and we can inject it into component. Next question is what are pipes and what is pipe decorator? Pipe is used to transform data before displaying it. Suppose we are fetching data from database and there is a requirement to show the data in different format in UI. So we can use the pipe, and @pipe is used to create the custom pipe. Next question is list of built-in pipe provided by Angular. So there are multiple pipes are available. So I have listed few of it. First one is currency, date, decimal, lowercase, uppercase, percent, slice, async. Next question is what is chain pipe and how do you chain pipes? Chain pipe means you are using more than one pipes to transform the data. Let's take example. Here is the birth date example. There is a requirement like you want to show the date in uppercase and full date. So here I am using the full date, full date, and uppercase. This is two pipes I am using. This is called the chain pipe. Next question is how can you create custom pipe in Angular? To create custom pipe, first you have to create one file like custom pipe.ts file. You have to provide @pipe and in which you can define the name of your pipe. Then you have to write export class your custom pipe name, and after that implements pipe transform. The pipe transform you have to implement that, and it contains a transform method which has value and unit parameters. Here I have written the some logic to convert to Celsius and Farad, to convert temperature into Celsius and Farad. Once we create this custom pipe, we have to declare the pipe into ng module in declaration section. And to use the custom pipe, I am using the here like Celsius, Farad, and this is the pipe signature. And I'm using temp converter. This is my custom pipe name, and I'm providing Celsius and Farad. This is the value I'm providing. Next question is what is the difference between observable and promises? Observable emits multiple value, whereas promises emit single value. Observable can be cancelable using unsubscribe, but promises cannot be cancelled. Observable is lazy, means observable does not get called until we subscribe to it, but promises is not lazy. Next question is what is HTTP client and how to use HTTP client? Angular provides HTTP client API known as Angular provides simplified client HTTP API known as the HTTP client. This client is available from @angular/common/HTTP package. To use that, you have to import HTTP client module in app.module.ts, which is available from angular/common/HTTP. And you have to add it into import section. HTTP client module, you have to specify in a import section. To inject the HTTP client into services, you have to import HTTP client from angular/common/HTTP, and you have to inject it into service constructor so that you will use that to call the web API. Means in web API we have get, put, post, delete method. So HTTP client help you to call the web API method. Next question is how do you perform error handling in Angular service? So I have created here one service employee service.ts, in which I am calling the one function get employee data, and I'm returning it HttpClient.get, and I have provided endpoint, and I'm using pipe. Here simply I am returning the result from the services. Next is app component.ts I have created, in which I am subscribing to the get employee data method, which is available from employee service. And here I have written this error colon and console. Here I'm writing the error into console. Like this way we are capture the error, whatever error we are getting at the time of the API call. So that's all the interview questions. So I have listed few of yours. So do you have any questions or any concern? Then contact me via this email. Yeah. Thank you all.